Hello and welcome to Unstress. My name is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I am recording this podcast, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I pay my respects to their elders of the past, present and emerging. Hello and welcome to Unstress. My name is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Well, today we're going to be exploring the breath again, but in a different way yet again. The breath is something that I keep coming back to because it's important to be reminded of just how important it is. I am aware of its power, but I still really find reminding myself of these things important. And today's is going to be a really interesting episode. My guest today is Dean Gladstone. Now, many of you will know Dean Gladstone, or Deano, from that legendary show Bondi Rescue, now in its 16th year. But there is a lot more to Dean than you may know. Let me share some of that with you. Dean is a former national gold medalist in swimming and surf lifesaving. He's a qualified and practising yoga teacher, personal trainer and holistic health coach, a Wim Hof method instructor, and of course, a Bondi lifeguard. He has 20 years of experience coaching both kids and adults, ensuring a unique and individual approach to improving the health and performance of all his students and clients. For the past 4 years, Dean has been facilitating Power of the Breath workshops and courses, and thousands of students have gained a full understanding of the health benefits associated with breath work and are healing themselves from a range of challenges, including anxiety, respiratory conditions, sleep disorders, snoring and fatigue. His primary focus on the study of many breathing techniques, including the oxygen advantage, XPT, traditional pranayama, tumo, holotropic, and the power of CO2, carbon dioxide tolerance, for performance. This specialisation in all things breathworks resulted in some vast improvements for some elite athletes who see Dean for performance training. He's always had an interest in the breath, and as you will hear, as an asthmatic child, he managed this through his swim training at first and incorporated nutrition, breathing, movement, and particularly yoga. Dean believes firmly that by improving diet, hydration, and mind setting and goal setting and mobility and movement and of course breath are one way of overcoming many challenges. He has had an incredible career as a lifeguard, literally rescuing people and bringing them back to life with the power of breath, which means he's got a unique perspective on this whole story. Listen, I've known Deano for quite a few years. We first met at Aaron McKenzie's Origin of Energy gym, and we've got to know each other. And I have been, as you will hear, a huge fan of Bondi Rescue. I believe they are Australia's greatest ambassadors, and Deano is certainly one of those. So it's a great chat. It was great to catch up with him. I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Dean Gladstone. Welcome to the show, Deano.
Thanks, Ron. Good to be here. Great to chat.
Yes, mate. Look, I have been so looking forward to this because, there's so much I want to talk to you about today. You are one of the legends of the Bondi Rescue team, and I have been a huge fan of that show for, is it 16 years, Deano?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're starting to film season 16 this Saturday.
And we're going to be talking about all the stuff that you're doing on top of that, as well as that in breath, in yoga, in swimming as well. But I wanted to take a step back to that show because I have said this to you many times when we've spoken, that I actually think you guys on Bondi Rescue are the best ambassadors Australia has ever had. I mean, the way you guys approach this international audience, who are often beach illiterate and do silly things, and you maintain this respectful yet irreverent approach to them. You walk this really fine line. Tell us a little bit about Bondi Rescue. Give us a little bit of behind the scenes of how it all started, how it's done, how you guys do it.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Lovely compliments. Some of the bits that I like about the show is when they sort of showing us losing our composure a little bit, and the show is very real. So kudos to council for actually letting us do it, because I'm surprised that they let it go ahead, because it's not clear exactly how we do things sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes if someone needs rescuing, we might wait and let that person not suffer, but let them understand that they're in a rip, so they understand they need rescuing. And other times it's you race straight in and pull them out as quick as possible. So it's not clear exactly how and why we do things, but they've let us be ourselves and encouraged us to be ourselves, and filmed it warts and all, we could say, and it's been extremely popular, and it seems to be character driven, and the kids like it. The educational component of it, which is just so much better than traditional education, it seems. And the way I've sort of changed the way I teach, and getting kids having fun seems to be a great way to get them to learn.
Because it goes into how many countries?
It's on in over 200 countries. So it was on Foxtel, National Geographic, and Netflix has been big for it, and they take it on and off Netflix here and there. I see a little surge in my Instagram followers every now and then.
Because I've heard you say that the impact on lifesaving, on surf safety, has been profound.
Yeah, absolutely. Our rescues have cut considerably in the last 20 years, maybe at least 50, 60, possibly 70% down.
Yeah, because Bondi must be one of the busiest beaches in the world.
Yeah, well, Australia most certainly, Southern Hemisphere maybe. I'm not sure worldwide.
Yeah, well, world's probably a bit big. I love those kind of big statements, but
in terms of proximity to the CBD, you look at Sydney. Bondi's 5 minutes out of the CBD. So on a busy summer afternoon, a lot of the city has the opportunity just to go down and have a swim at Bondi. So it does allow big crowds just to get down there and cool off.
Yeah, and it's often a destination for overseas visitors, just have to see the beach. And that scene behind you now is that iconic view of Bondi, and with Bondi baths right there in front of it.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, well, just before I started working, we had the Sydney Olympics on Bondi Beach. And I started about a month or two after that.
Wow.
There was they kept a crew on over the Olympics, and people used to come to Bondi to see the Olympics. That was good for tourism Australia, I'd say. But now when I tell kids, the Olympics were here, it was before their time, so they don't know about it as much.
Yeah,
but,
and it was such an impressive construction down there. It was quite awesome, really, what they'd done.
Yeah, I'm friends with Kerry Potthast, actually, and there's a photo of her sort of, that gold medal is on the wall as a mural now, which is pretty cool to see. I think it was a really iconic moment for Australia.
Yeah. But Deano, that is Bondi Rescue, and as I said, I just admire you guys so much, and I think you're terrific. But you've gone on to do a lot of other stuff. I mean, you're involved in, yoga is one thing you've been doing a lot of, and fitness training. Tell us a bit about how that fits in and what you're doing there.
Yeah, Ron, I guess, long story short, we could take it right back. I was an asthmatic as a kid. I was hospitalized when I was 9. And that led me to stay swimming training. I had to regulate the breath, and that's probably why I'm so passionate about teaching breath work now. And it probably gave me a career as a lifeguard, although the breathing struggles that I had may have also led to the learning difficulties that I also possessed as a kid. But either way, it ended up as a really cool thing for me, and I always swam, I always kept fit, and I felt like I had to. And that probably gave me, or helped give me, a career as a lifeguard. So that's where it started. I became super passionate about health and fitness after I was assaulted and almost killed in 2005. And as you know, because you did a bit of work with me, I had my 4 front teeth knocked out when I was king hit. And after that, I lost my health. And, you know, we've talked a lot about health. Both you and I are very passionate about it over the years. And this health journey that I was, you know, I wasn't unhealthy, but I just really fine-tuned things to get my health back. So I could, for me, if I couldn't work as a lifeguard, I was also a personal trainer before this happened. And I'm a plumber by trade as well. So if I couldn't work, if my body didn't work I couldn't work. So it was quite a stressful thing. So getting my body working was very important for me back then. And again, I'm super grateful for that at the moment. So it is something I'm so grateful for, just to have a working body that's able to lift, run, swim, and save people's lives. You know, and the difference between being good and very good at what you do could be someone's life. So that's always a great motivator. You know, you're not training, you're not being healthy for yourself, you're doing it for others.
That king hit, I mean, 2005, I mean, many people, not many, but people have died
Absolutely
from that. And I mean, the physical assault is one thing, but the impact that has mentally on you, literally knocking the confidence out of you, is another. I mean, how did you work through that?
Yeah, there was, it all happened. There was post-traumatic stress syndrome. I had allergies. I couldn't have sugar. I had this gluten problem. I used to scratch myself till I bled at night. The slightest bit of dairy or something and my nasal passage would block up and I couldn't sleep through my nose. And gosh, I bang on about nose breathing at the moment. So, I was aware of that then. Like when my nose blocked, I wouldn't sleep and I was unhappy and it was horrible. So yeah, everything was problematic. I didn't want to leave the house. I felt uncomfortable around people drinking. There was a whole range of issues going on. And I was very anxious and hypersensitive. Yeah, I guess what I talk about with all those things, I had this hypersensitivity to food, Ron, where if I had something slightly bad, and I highly suspect it was sugar, vegetable oil, and gluten, if I had one of those things, it would set me off. And it just wasn't worth it. So I generally cooked all my own meals, mainly organic, for a number of years while my sort of, was able to heal my own gut and do all the sort of things that we're so passionate about. It's just hard to quantify exactly which one helped and which one did. And
but it was a process that you went through for many years.
Well, many years. It was, in a sense, I was able to compete at a really high level and do things very well, eating a horrible diet. And after the assault, I wasn't able to do anything pretty much. So there was a huge rebuilding process. And Aaron McKenzie, who has probably been on the show.
Oh, yes, he has. And this is where you and I met first off many years ago. Yep, Aaron.
So before Aaron, I found Paul Chek's book, How to Eat, Move and Be Healthy. Yes. And that was just like, it was just written profoundly. And it just really explained so much to me. And, still to this day, it's relevant. And he was very far ahead of his time. This is before paleo was even a fad word. Yeah. And I was basically on a paleo diet, actually drinking raw milk as well.
I remember that. I know that. Milk, yes.
Which is hard to find these days.
It is. But Paul Chek is very much about the holistic approach and the totem pole, I think he talks about. And,
Foundations of Health,
Foundations of Health, great, ahead of his time. And Aaron, of course, a legend in his own right. We've both benefited from that. But then you move into, well, it's ironic really, isn't it? Because as a lifesaver, talk about life being in the breath, you guys are there doing it for real. But then yoga also says life is in the breath. And then you're exploring breathing in lots of other ways. Tell us a little bit about that exploration and what you've come up with along the way.
Yeah, I guess mid-20s, I think I was swimming a lot competitively, and I could barely touch my knees when I bent over, let alone my toes. So I started doing yoga for some flexibility. And it was the breathing that I said, well, hang on, this is actually helping my asthma. I don't actually have to swim as much as I used to maintain my breath. So yeah, that was brilliant for me, and I sort of fell in love with yoga. Started implementing it with my training clients. Was sort of teaching it to people, and then I did my formal yoga teaching about 5 years ago.
Yeah, because then we both explored Buteyko, and I know you're in very close contact with Patrick McEwen, who's also been a guest on the podcast. I mean, Patrick is Buteyko worldwide, the guy, isn't he? So
yep, absolutely.
And he's progressed it along a little bit too. What are some of the principles of Buteyko, which then Patrick and now with you as being the instructor here in Australia have taken on to the next level? Tell us a bit about Buteyko and where Patrick's taken it.
Yeah, well, I guess Dr. Konstantin Buteyko was a Russian. Oh, he wasn't born Russian. He was working in Russia as a doctor in the 20s, 30s, and he started suffering from hypertension, which was his specialty as a doctor. And the outcome wasn't looking good for someone suffering from hypertension back then. He thought it was certain death, and they're his words, not mine. So he started looking at what he could do to help himself, and realized that breathing was such a major contributor to his health and the health of others. So he started noticing people that were sick that were breathing incorrectly, and he started correlating the two. And by changing some people's breathing, he was able to make them less sick, or possibly heal them. So it took off on a bit of a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah, and then and the whole concept of Buteyko is really about controlling the breath.
Yeah, control. Yeah, so I guess it's nasal breathing. And when we breathe through the nose, we actually get less oxygen into the body than we breathe through the mouth, because they're smaller holes.
Mm-hmm.
But when we breathe through the nose, it filters the air, it spiralizes it, it humidifies it, and it makes it ideal for our lungs to absorb and get that oxygen to our working muscles.
I mean, I was when I did the Buteyko technique, I've done it twice, the courses. One of the things that struck me was the use of micropore tape on the mouth at night. And I know it's something that we do a lot in the surgery. That's pretty profound, isn't it?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And it wasn't, when I started delving into this functional breathing stuff, I had done it either with you or with Paul Chek back in the day. So these things weren't new to me. Like, Patrick doesn't sort of claim them as his own. He just shares functional breathing techniques that work for people. And when I run online courses, and it's hard to quantify, I talked about it earlier, the mouth taping seems to be a huge aspect of it. So, there's de-evolution for many reasons. Humans aren't breathing the way we've meant to, and our mouths are shaped very differently. And I'm sure there'd be a back episode about this. I know I've had 8 teeth taken out, and I was a dysfunctional breathing kid as an asthmatic. So the mouth taping has been revolutionary for me. And I literally feel smarter, Ron. Like, I struggled at school. Like, I didn't know the alphabet when I left school. I tell the story that I had to, as an apprentice plumber, I'd be looking through the street directory and I'd get confused around the TXW or XTW, and I'd had to relearn the alphabet in my when I was about 20, so I could look through street directories. So I certainly struggled as a kid, and now to be teaching 3-day courses and running online courses, and it's I'm sure my teachers would be scratching their heads.
Well, I mean, it's the power of the breath, isn't it? And balancing it all out. Because I know I've been a chronic mouth breather for my entire life, up until about 10 or 15 years ago, when I really embraced this taping of the mouth. And it's been really interesting and very profound. But Patrick's taken it a little bit further, because he's also, there's a limit to, because of the name Buteyko, and it's patented and all that, whatever it is. He's taken it further, and he's written several books, but the oxygen advantage is one of those things. Tell us a bit about what that means and what you teach there.
Yeah, I think Buteyko was more skewed to asthma and medical. And with the oxygen advantage, Patrick's been able to implement this stuff for performance. So working with athletes and top CEOs. And the science now shows, Ron, and this is what I tell people, if you breathe better, you're going to perform better mentally and physically. So what doesn't that cover?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I know when I spoke to Patrick, and this is the kind of the sort of archetypal thing is the athlete, breathing through their mouth and breathing really hard, but that's not to their advantage, is it?
No, it's not in some cases. The big one, I think, is the immune benefits, quite simply breathing through the nose. And I think over time, the compound you get from recovery, from filtering the air, from getting less sick, from sleeping better, that's going to build up to training better. And if we can train breathing through the nose, that just allows that top gear right at the end, where if we do need to open our mouth and give that complete last 110, 20%, we can hit that top gear and really open up the gas, so to speak.
Because ultimately breathing is about, while it's not about specifically oxygen, it's about getting the oxygen to where it's needed.
Yeah.
And that's the advantage, isn't it, really?
That's the advantage. And the Bohr effect, do you know much about the Bohr effect?
No, go on, tell us about that.
Patrick Woodard. So that was discovered in 1904 by a Danish biochemist, Christian Bohr, whose son, I think, won a Nobel Peace Prize in the 40s. But so the Bohr effect is the relationship between oxygen and hemoglobin, oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. So if there's too much oxygen, the bond increases with the hemoglobin. So we need CO2 in the blood for gas to exchange on a cellular level. So basically, when you're running fast and breathing through your mouth, we're getting more oxygen in, but the bond increases in the hemoglobin, which is our red blood cells. And that means we're not exchanging gas. So whilst we've got more oxygen in the system, we're not getting it down on a cellular level to exchange and get rid of that CO2. So slowing that breath down, breathing in through the nose is more functional and more effective. Now, it is difficult at first for people to adapt. So there's a couple of steps backwards before you really reach that benefit.
And then, of course, along comes a guy called Wim Hof. And I mean, for those that aren't familiar, give us a little bit of background of who this guy is, and why he's attracted. Because we did something together a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Tell us about Wim Hof.
Yeah, Wim. So Wim is everyone's heard of Wim now. So and you call him Wim, I'll call him Wim. Wim. And he's a crazy Dutchman in his early 60s, and he's broken 25. Maybe more world records, but what he's famous for, and they did a study in 2011, his breathing method, he's able to influence his immune system. So they did a study in 2011 when they injected him with an endotoxin, sort of like the flu, and he was able to breathe that out. Now that was pretty cool. And they said, you've broken all these world records. You're the Iceman. You've been doing this. It's a bit of a once-off. He said, I'll be able to train other people to do it. And he took a group of volunteers up the mountain, and he trained them for 4 days. And I think they practiced for a couple more days at home, and they were able to pass the same test. Now, I think with meta-analysis, maybe 10,000 people had been injected with an endotoxin, and the results were pretty consistent. They had early signs of getting the flu, a headache, swelling, and all these people doing the Wim Hof technique were able to fight that off. And interestingly enough, it's very different to what people conceive as normal meditation. We would think relaxing and trying to calm the body, and it's actually the opposite. It's this technique which releases cortisol and adrenaline in the blood, and it's actually those things that fight off the pro-inflammatory and increase the anti-inflammatory markers in the blood. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. And so different from Buteyko I'm not sure about the oxygen advantage, but the Buteyko is all about breath holding and gentle breathing through the nose and all that. But this is, we went, Dr. Lewis and I, we went over to your place 2 weeks ago to do this little bit of a taste of the Wim Hof technique. And, I was telling you before we came on that I generally would not go into the ocean if it was under 18 degrees. I am the all-time wimp. And yet
I see you walking Bondi Beach. Surely you have a swim at the end, right?
Yeah, I do. But anyway, this, I knew we were facing water that was pretty close to zero. I think it was 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. And I thought, this is going to be really interesting. And gee, it was. And we ran through that. It was amazing.
Yeah, it is an amazing technique. And, worldwide, there's literally thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people doing it. And the data coming through from it is amazing. It's like a religion for some people. If you jump on the Facebook page, they just accredit everything to it. And, whatever it takes some people to align themselves with. For some people, it's a diet change. It might be going vegan or going paleo, or it might be starting yoga, and they attach themselves to this thing that helps their health. And it's brilliant for them. I love seeing people on the bus.
Yes, but you spent some time with him doing some stuff, didn't you, with Wim Hof?
Yeah, I trained to be a Wim Hof certified instructor. So it involves me going to Europe twice. And I'm pretty grateful for those trips now. I was thinking it was a little bit expensive. And I went to Wim's house in Stroe, just outside Amsterdam, and trained there for 3 or 4 days. And then as the master instructor module, we went to Poland and climbed a mountain with Wim in my board shorts, basically.
Wow.
And for me, who was pretty terrified of the cold, a little bit like you, Ron, not keen to get in there when it's cold, or if I did, I certainly wanted a wetsuit. That was a big fear for me to overcome.
But getting in that ice bath for me was a just under 3 minute thing, which I was very proud of. But going for a walk up an ice mountain for, in your shorts is a several hour thing.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. Or is it?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess I had time to train. So I literally bought, you saw the freezer at my house. I've got a 500-litre chest freezer that I jump in. And before going overseas to climb a mountain with Wim Hof and some other people, you want to prepare. So I was literally training my cold exposure limits, trying to build it up. Before we did the climb in mountain, we did some pretty, we did a lot of breathing. We did a lot of meditation. We prepped for it. We went inwards, and it was really fascinating during the ascent up the mountain, trying to focus, because I had my GoPro and I had my phone, and I wanted to get footage to share, so I could share with people. But if I was stuffing around too much with my cameras, I would get cold. So I would put it away and just internalize and focus on the breath. And it was almost like I was omming my way up the mountain. I was creating a little bit of internal vibration and heat. And when you focus on staying warm, you stay warm. And as soon as that attention goes, I was getting cold.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because on that Saturday that we were over at your place, when we got in the first time, I was really impressed that I could do that, and I was very focused. And then we got into the sauna, and then we got back into the bath, and I was feeling pretty cocky about it.
Yeah, we were just chatting, weren't we?
We were just chatting, and I got cold really quickly. And I said to you, Deano, I just have to stop talking. and I refocus. So I could just imagine you walking up that mountain with a camera trying to get it all focused. Wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you incorporate that? How often are you doing that in a week? Because this is all about intentional stress, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hormesis.
Absolutely. I sort of, it's when I run a workshop, and I don't run Wim Hof specific workshops, because the functional breathing work that Patrick McEwen teaches, we had people coming to my Wim Hof workshops that were mouth breathers, Ron. Mm-hmm. And it's just getting them to breathe through the nose is such a priority. So I really have a big functional breathing component in my workshops, but a lot of it is about understanding stress and not being afraid of stress, and the way breathing affects stress. And then to finish, getting in the ice bath, which is a stressor on the body, and how we breathe during that stressor. So a lot of it is stress related.
Yes. Well, that
you've written a book about this, Ron. You could, and then everything links, right? The yep. breathing's linked to the way we sleep. The sleeping's linked to the way we recover.
Yeah.
And the way we feel and our chances of exercise. It's literally the yoga world comes in. The people that I rescue go into fight or flight response, and they're more likely to drown and die. Like all my worlds sort of collide in this one place. The people with inflamed respiratory organs are possibly drinking too much dairy and eating processed food. So everything comes back in this circle where it's like, well, hang on, we've just got to simplify everything, breathe properly, hydrate properly.
It's so interesting to hear about that intentional stress, hormesis it's called, and when like another intentional stress is fasting, and I've had this discussion with people who are into fasting, and they say you actually have to prepare somebody before they go into fasting or intermittent fasting, because if they're on a low fat diet and they go to intermittent fasting, they are not going to be able to do that. Yeah. So you've got to prepare first for a few weeks to go low carb, change your need for or your balance for glucose, and then you can go into intermittent fasting. And here you are saying, yeah, the Wim Hof thing is an intentional stress, but unless somebody actually prepares with functional breathing first, it makes it really difficult. So it's interesting to draw those comparisons.
Yeah, I often use the analogy about fasting, and the other one I use is sort of barefoot. And so some people really respond well to making life a little bit tougher, getting cold occasionally, missing a meal, and sort of taking off their shoes and, all this fancy footwear. We're seeing some people respond really well to being barefoot, missing a meal, or getting cold occasionally. So, yeah, and they're all types of hormesis or hormetic stress. Being in the sauna, exercise, there are other types. So, yeah, some people respond really well to some of those individually, and as a combination, they respond well to them all together as well. So I often use that analogy.
How do you incorporate what you've learnt with Wim Hof? I mean, apart from running your courses, which of course I'm going to have links to and all of that, but I'm interested as to how you incorporate that into your weekly or daily routine. Like, would you therapeutically hop into an ice bath 2 or 3 times a week, or every day, or or in the freezer? God, I thought you just used the freezer to store the ice, but you actually got in there.
Yeah. The freezer was sitting at sort of between 1 and 2 degrees constantly. Wow. So first thing in the morning, sometimes I just jump in the freezer for 30 seconds, and it lights you up. It increases your metabolism. It makes you alert. It's a cold shower on steroids, basically.
Wow.
So having that there is, for when I was training for Poland or preparing, having the freezer was essential. And a lot of the Wim Hof people have their own freezers, so they can do it. So the cold therapy for some people, Ron, is a game changer. Like, it is absolutely mind blowing. I don't know if I told you the story about the lovely Irish guy. He at the Wim Hof thing, he got up and he talked about throwing himself in front of a bus, and the room just stopped. And it's like, and he goes, I caught contact with the bus driver. on the way down. He's like, I've ruined my life and I'm going to ruin this guy's life.
Oh my God.
Obviously, he didn't die, but he tried to commit suicide. The bus swerved. He ended up in one of Wim Hof's ice baths, and they were going in and out sauna and ice bath. And he said, oh, it gives me goosebumps when I tell this story. For the first time in his life, he had this clarity of his head, and he never knew what it was before, because his whole life he had had voices and things in his head, and he never had this ability to think clearly. And he found that in the ice. So, I've read bits and pieces, sort of 70-80% of mental health could be inflammation of the brain. So this ice bathing for some people, and some people that I've worked with, anxiety, stress disorders, is just so good. Yeah. For me, I it's a bit like fasting. I know it's good for me. It's not easy. I don't love it. I only do it because it's good for me. Whereas these people, they need it. It's essential for them.
Yeah.
So does that explain it?
Yeah.
A little bit. Well, different things have more effect on some people than others. So I love the breathing and an ice bath once a week. But more my mindset about it now is, if I get cold, I'm not worried I'm going to get sick. I know I'm going to be okay, and I know I'm going to get warm. So when I ride my little scooter around, if it starts raining or I don't have a jacket, I get cold. It's probably even good for me. So a little dose of cold here and there, and is fine.
Well, it's certainly empowered me to dive in, even when it reaches the 16 degrees, I'll go, that's nothing, but listen.
Empower is a brilliant word, Ron. So getting people in the ice bath, thinking they can do something that they can't do is literally life-changing for some people. And the more people getting out of their comfort zone in wherever it may be, and it may be as simple as going for a swim, but the ice bath seems to be, Tony Robbins gets people to walk across fire, right? It's one of those things. It just seems to break the chains.
Yeah. Now, listen, we're finished. This has been great because we've covered some great territory. I just want to take a step back from your role in Bondi Rescue, from you being a yoga, a breath, a Wim Hof, a oxygen advantage teacher, because we're all on this health journey together through life. And, what do you think the biggest challenge is for people on that journey?
Oh, there's so much information out there, Ron. And I think different things work for different people. And there's people out there on a carnivore diet, just eating steak. There's a doctor in the US who I've been following. He's doing really well, right? He's breaking world records. And then you see people on the other end of the scale on a vegan diet. And some of them look like they're doing really well as well. Others not so well. There's some people probably eating steak not doing well. So it's probably trying to find out what's right for the individual. And there's so much crap out there, and people selling so much crap. It's really hard for people to find out what's right for them, and not to get caught up trying to buy the latest shakes or teas or supplements, and do the simple things right, and we talked about a couple of them, sort of breathing and diet and mindset earlier.
Deano, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to have links to all of your great stuff that you've got on offer. And again, thank you for everything you've been doing.
Ron, thank you. People probably don't know you did a lot for me in those times when I was really struggling. And, it's always a pleasure to catch up and chat health with you. We don't see each other anywhere near as often as we used to. So we'll have to organise another ice bath in the new year.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, mate.
So I'm often asked, is all stress bad? And the answer is no, it's not. I would define a bad stress as something that compromises your immune system and promotes chronic inflammation, which is the common denominator in all diseases, mental and physical. So a stress that is of concern is one that compromises the immune system and promotes chronic inflammation. And that's why I've used the model of the 5 stresses: emotional, environmental, postural, nutritional, and dental stress. And regular listeners of this podcast will know that understanding stress is an important aspect to the show. But there are stresses which are actually good for us, and they are called hormetic stresses or hormesis, intentional stresses that actually promote or enhance the immune function. And examples of that we touched on today: cold baths, fasting, exercise, saunas. I might even include meditation as an intentional stress that is good for us. But it was quite a revelation for me to do the ice bath with Deano just a few weeks ago. And I'm certainly looking forward to doing more of his workshops to explore this further. Maybe even to crawl into a freezer. Now, I never thought I would actually say that, but it could be an interesting thing to do. I feel really empowered by what Deano taught me and shared with me. And I'm very, very grateful to him for that. I hope we're going to be doing some workshops together in the coming year. And I will certainly have links to some of the terrific programs he runs face-to-face and online. We'll have those linked to the show notes. So this year is going to be a very exciting year, and we're going to be focusing on personal empowerment as a theme. And we're going to be exploring all the different pillars and all the different stresses. We're going to be doing that in online events and live events, and working with some of my guests in workshops, hopefully around the country. Dare I even say that we're going to be traveling around the country? Well, we may not be able to go overseas, so traveling around the country is something I'm actually really looking forward to. So I hope you enjoyed today's program. Until next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well. This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health, and related subjects. The content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she should consult with an appropriately qualified medical practitioner. Guests who speak in this podcast express their own opinions, experiences, and conclusions.